But first off, the state of the states. We're being told we're all in this together, but it doesn't seem that we are all in this together. I mean, you stop and think about it. We've had all sorts of mixed messages in recent weeks. The Prime Minister, I can't fault where he's going, but as the Prime Minister even said today, the states will make their own separate decisions. The states will make their own separate announcements. And while some in Canberra think the Federation is working fine because it's kumbaya between the state leaders and the Commonwealth, there is a lot of disparity. There is a lot of mixed messages, a lot of uncertainty. And even down to the football, where the football's on one minute, not on the next. Somebody got a false positive, or was it a false negative in a test? An entire game was cancelled. People can fly from one state to another, or can they? All those things are just mixed messages. Meanwhile, state borders are still shut. And maybe we'll see some state borders opening soon, and that's all well and good and fine. But the practicality is a lot of us, ordinary folk who aren't attending the National Cabinet meetings, scratching our heads and wondering what is the message we're meant to follow. And this is part of the reason why there's been these problems and breakouts in places like Victoria. Now, I know that states like Queensland always said Victoria was going to be the problem. Victoria was the place where they weren't following through with the testing regime. They weren't redeploying staff from stood-down government offices, people who were otherwise engaged in certain departments that were not then meeting for their particular business, weren't redeployed into the health tasks as they have been in other states like Queensland, like New South Wales, like South Australia. So what's this National Cabinet actually been doing? Have people been looking at best practice, or we're just doing our thing and the Prime Minister can front all of the announcements? All the happy news, well, the Premiers say is our news. All the bad news, well, we'll blame ScoMo. Is that really what National Cabinet has achieved? And that is a reasonable thing for us to be a bit cynical about tonight. So a few weeks ago, when Daniel Andrews, the Premier of Victoria, decided to say, oh, it's good to have that protest, get out there, protest it, and then at the last minute said, oh, no, don't do that. He's wondering why a whole bunch of people gathered around and said, oh, well, it's Eid, it's like the Christmas celebration for Muslims. Let's all get the family together, because Daniel said 10,000 can gather in town, so let's all get together. Well, of course that's what's happened, because not everybody sits 24/7 waiting to find out what the pronouncement of the hour might well be by some of these leaders. And it's just, the messages are all mixed, and we're all going to go for the best stuff because we've all got cabin fever. We're all somewhat over this thing. And it's certainly my view that 3 weeks ago, when the protests took place in Queensland, the Palaszczuk government came to an end because Anastasia Palaszczuk lost all credibility. But time will tell when Halloween comes around, the end of October, when the Queensland election is called. So you've got this sort of tribal treatment of Australians, tribes based around different states, and then you've got tribes based around different ethnic groups, different migration stories, different language groups. You're supposed to not reinforce the sense of tribalism when you create a community. You're supposed to bring people together. You've got to find a community pathway on these things. And if some people don't read or write English as well as others, then part of your job, Daniel Andrews, is actually to communicate with those people about something more than just simply branch stacking. But of course, this is what we've seen in Victoria. This division language that's since come forward, where people are blaming multicultural groups, I think we should just simply nix that, forget using that. Stop trying to create division and hatred. It's unreasonable, it's un-Australian, it's not the way we should do. We should be pointing the blame at our political leaders who want the happy news but don't want the bad news, and certainly don't seem to want the hard work. As I said, the Prime Minister, to my mind, has done a great job. Greg Hunt has done a great job. But some of these state ministers really are just showing up to be seen. And then on top of that, you've got this crazy movement that started in America off the back of that horrendous police killing of that chap. And you've now got this cancel everything movement, where everything is being cancelled. I mean, they've got to the point of tipping over so many statues in America, they've now tipped over civil rights leaders' statues. We don't want that sort of division here, and yet we're getting it. We're getting it here because, again, we're not getting the local leadership that's loud and solid about things that we need at this time. there's been this uncertainty created, and it's going to have a ramification 6 months from now. There's no doubt about it. And it's not about job seeker and job keeper and all of that taxpayer-funded necessary large S. It's actually going to be about that confidence, the factor of businesses being closed down, about the way things will work its way through the court, about the way receiver managers will administer companies that are failing, about people losing jobs and not having the confidence to go and spend money. And even in its iconic 100th anniversary year, one of the number one brands of this country, Qantas, has now been put under enormous uncertainty as well. Everything has some uncertainty about it, and this is a time where we need to bring our leadership to the fore. Victoria has been all but cancelled, as state governments have begun hostilities all around the country. In so many ways, the one unity ticket we've got in this country right now is an anti-Victorian feeling, and that is unreasonable and unfair. It's just Daniel Andrews that's at fault, not everyday Victorians, certainly not country Victorians. And it's reasonable for us to be very political in our judgment about this bloke and his complete failure. His complete failure. He can tell you with great authority the contents of his naval lint, but I don't believe he actually really knows how he is running this state other than down. This national criticism of Victoria is very much so justified. This Andrews government has invested in division. It's invested in gatekeepers at various cultural community groups. It's all been about control, about commit to us and we'll look after you. It's not been about be part of Australia, be who you are and be it for Australia. And this is stuff that's got to stop. What we desperately need is for Australians to feel a sense of confidence, a sense of commitment to this country, a sense of being connected to what's going on, because Australians of all backgrounds and beliefs, of all experiences, whether they are first Australians or the most recently arrived, everybody is actually in this wanting to do the right thing by each other if we, in fact, are given proper and reasonable leadership. Stuff we haven't been getting, I believe. And worse still, in recent days, in Victoria, their first thing was to create more division, a usual tool of the left. Pull the threads on the tapestry of our society, pull it all apart. Just awful.